booms, okay? You know, my 5-year-old self just came out and said train
Trains make it go boom boom.
boom boom.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to Nerdtaku Podcast, where we watch it so you don't have to. I'm your host, Eli. With me is my co-host, Ben.
Hey guys, how's it going?
This week, we will be reviewing the 2010 action-packed film, Unstoppable. Spoiler warnings ahead. Ben, every week I ask you this. Spoilers?
Absolutely. Can definitely expect those.
Director, Tony Scott. Main cast, Chris Pine, Denzel Washington, Rosario Dawson. Ben, when I think of action-packed films that are based on true stories, I was never thinking this was real until I watched it and went, wow, I can't believe this was actually a real event. That this whole situation could ever happen in our United States train system. Never thought it could happen, but it did. But it was good. It was what are your initial impressions of this film?
Oh man, I was just totally pulled into this film. I loved the fact that it was based on a true story and the fact that it's a freaking train barreling down the tracks at full power with no air brakes. I was just like, what in the fuck? This actually happened. Holy shit. I was pulled in, man. I love that Chris Pine and Denzel Washington were the lead roles. I love them both, and they did an amazing job.
So, this film on IMDb got a 6.8 out of 10, and the synopsis is: with an unmanned half-mile long freight train barreling towards the city, a veteran engineer and a young conductor race against the clock to prevent a catastrophe. It pretty self-explanatory there. I couldn't say it better myself, and I gave it a 8.75.
I gave it a 9.25.
Very small differences. But let's get into it. Let's get into it. Plot.
A 1.
I gave plot a 1. I initially, when I first was watching this, I was thinking 0.75. But for being based on true events, it's really a good story. It's telling the story of this train that's hurling down this track in Pennsylvania. And honestly, it's terrifying to think that there's a turn in Pennsylvania that if a train derails could literally kill millions of people. It's utterly terrifying to me. And to show that in a film, man, the plot was good. It was overall just a really good story about telling the true events.
I was captivated from the beginning's pretty slow, but overall, I thought the story was an amazing story to do a film on. A runaway train in Pennsylvania could have caused tons of damage with two real life heroes that decided to stop said train from creating an epic disaster. Man, I ate that shit up. I absolutely loved that the story was entirely based on true events. The fact that one employee did something absolutely stupid, not tying in air brakes and keeping the train at full power, jumping off to flip a switch instead of stopping the train, backing it up, flipping the switch and going forward, made it all the more better. I just thought it was a very impressive story to do a film on. It highlights these two amazing people, Frank and Will, that chased down a runaway train. Fucking fantastic.
I will say this was a unique story that I was not expecting a film to ever be made on it. Never thought my 5-year-old self would want trains, like lots of trains. Like it was dope. I really enjoyed the boom booms and the explosions in the plot. It was really good.
The Boom Booms? Did
Shut
you
up.
just say the Boom Booms?
Yes, I said the boom booms, okay? You know, my 5-year-old self just came out and said train
Trains make it go boom boom.
boom boom. Acting.
1.
I gave it a 0.75.
Really?
The beginning was really slow. I didn't really feel that connection in the beginning of the acting. It picked up for me, and I thought it was really good. I really liked the connection that Frank and Will had at the end, but that beginning was just a little too slow for me. I did not really like the chemistry, and the CEO dude was irritating me, but the actor is really good, but I felt like it was just meh for him.
I thoroughly enjoyed the acting throughout. I thought that the dynamic between Denzel and Chris, between their two characters, the fact that Frank is a veteran and Will comes in as a rookie, and they're basically kicking Frank out of, not basically, they are kicking Frank from his job. He had a 90-day notice, half benefits. Like, he was annoyed. And the fact that Will comes in and he wasn't really, I don't know. I just felt like the way they delivered their characters, having Frank give off this, he's annoyed of the company, that the company's doing this to him and bringing in all these new people to take their jobs because they can pay him less. Like, what veteran employee wouldn't feel the way that Frank did, right?
Right.
Like, he's annoyed. Any employee who's been there for so long would feel the same. And the way he delivered his character and his knowledge of trains, his everything he knew was delivered perfectly. I I really liked the ups and downs between Will and Frank throughout as they were getting to know each other in this locomotive. Rosario delivered Connie really well as the train master. She's trying to figure out what the hell happened and how the hell to stop it. And I get what you mean by Galvin, senior VP of the company, not really bringing out the best that he could in this character. But the way that the way that Kevin Dunn showed how Galvin thinks he's all that in a bag of potato chips because he was a yard master for 20 years before becoming a VP. I think he delivered it really well. He's sitting there blaming Connie for all of this, blaming the workers for all this trouble that he didn't think should have happened because he was a yard master and nothing like that happened when he was a yard master. And obviously mistakes happen. This was a big one. And I feel like Kevin Dunn kind of showed the holier than thou, I am way above you type character really well. There were, I don't know, I just felt like everyone delivered on their character, on their acting quite well.
Character development.
'Tis a 1.
I say it's a 1 as well. This development, Frank and Will, is the best development in this whole story. It's so good. I love the fact that they start joking with each other. It's like in the movie 1917 that we reviewed when the two soldiers were just walking around talking about like the flowers and such. You felt that chemistry with Frank and Will when they were in the train trying to get to know each other, and it just felt so good. Felt natural. And Connie, man, her development was just so good from, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try to help this train. And then she's like, fuck you. And like, I'm doing my own thing. Screw you. It was so good. Like this development with the main cast, in this story, it's about trains trying to stop each other from crashing. And it was just good. The main characters, the main cast just did so well with their development.
I completely agree. I really like the back and forth between Will and Frank as they're first starting, and then throughout the story, they start to actually get to know each other in that train car. Frank really wants to get to know Will, and so Will tells his story, and then Frank tells his story, and their dynamic completely changes when they're chasing down this train. Connie was superb. She started out as getting on and finding out that something happened, and she's trying to listen to everything Galvin tells her to do. And then when Frank and Will decide that they're going to go after the train, she says, "You know what? Fuck it. I don't care what Galvin says. If it's my job on the line, it's my job on the line. I don't give a shit. I'm going to help you catch this fucking train." And ultimately, with her decision to do so, saved everybody because that S curve, they got there and stopped the train from destroying Stanton with that S curve. And I don't know, there's just so much development between Frank and Will that all the side characters don't really matter because it was solely focused on mainly Frank and Will throughout the story and their development with each other. The dynamic completely changes from how Frank felt about Will in the beginning of him coming in and stealing his job to you and I are going to stop this train and I trust you with my life. Like that's where it got down to. I wholeheartedly trust you with my life. It was amazing.
Can we give a little credit to the guy who was driving the truck? I mean, that man got up
Ned.
to speed. Oh, it's so
Fucking
good.
Ned. Yes. I love how Connie, they see him on the on the TV, the cameras are pointing at him and they're like, "Is that Ned? Holy shit." Calls him up. He's like, "I'm a little busy right now." Hangs up the phone, catches up to the train. Like, fuck yeah, Ned. You're fucking awesome, bro.
I
You've
love
been with
Ned.
that train since the start. Good job, bro.
I love Ned. Ned's so good. Oh, I love Ned. Just a little side. I just wanted to bring in a little honorable mention there. Sound and music.
Oh, one.
I gave it a 0.75.
Yeah? Tell me why.
It was generic sound effects. I could not get behind the generic feeling of it. It was just like na 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 na. You heard it throughout this whole genre of action films. It was good. Don't get me wrong. It was good. It worked with the scenes. It worked well. I just felt it was so generic, and I could just imagine other films using it. It wasn't creative. It was just they took the same score from other films and just used it. There was nothing like new. There was nothing exciting. It was the same design, same score piece that every action film was using at the time.
I can understand that, but also I took it as this was done in 2010. There have been many action films since 2010, and so I had to kind of backtrack and think, okay, what was going on during that time? What kind of music was the high intense action film type music, and kind of take it from there. And that was, yes, used a lot, but that's because that's the type of music that was in at that time. So I took it with a grain of salt and didn't really critique on that because the intensity was still there. Even with the music being that generic for that time period, for when this film was made, that's the kind of music that was put into the action films. I felt like it was enough to pull the audience in at that time. We've heard it many times and it's developed more throughout the years. So you have to kind of put yourself back into 2010 and figure out how that makes you feel at that time. Doing so pulled me into the story and still captivated me because I put myself at that timeline. And I really enjoyed how 777 made this monstrous roar every time it passed people, cities, or vehicles and crossings. It made that kind of roar. Obviously I can't make it, but it was a nice additive to the fact that they're saying this is a monstrous giant train with very toxic chemicals going at 70 miles an hour with nobody controlling it. I loved it.
Cinematography.
That got a 0.75.
That got a 0.75 as well. Why did you initially give this a 0.75?
The beginning had a lot of darkness. I'm not a big fan of the dark scenes in dramatic like type films. I tried to put myself back in 2010 for that, and I still had seen multiple films around that time that didn't use the dark ambience, the dark tones of showing a dramatic and what are the words I'm looking for? They didn't use the dark tones to show a setup for a story. This one used it for like 30 minutes right at the beginning. I wasn't a big fan of that. I didn't really like it wasn't enough to pull me in right at the start. But then as it moved forward, I was able to kind of get past that, but it's still kind of stuck in the back of my mind while watching the film to keep it at a 0.75 because it didn't drop anymore because I enjoyed how they used real news coverage reels throughout the film while this train is barreling through Pennsylvania. And I enjoyed how the shots would bounce between newsreels, Frank and Will, Connie, Galvin, like when Will is trying to couple the train while they're going 60 miles an hour and he falls. It bounces between him, then the news choppers, then his wife, and then Frank, and then Connie, and then the news choppers again. And it just kept doing that intensity. Or when the guy is trying to load from the helicopter onto the train and it was showing his face and then it showed the helicopters and then it showed Galvin. I got pulled in with how often it bounced between. It was enough to captivate and bring me into the story, but that beginning darkness and tones, I'm not a fan of it. I see it too much.
I agree with you. The dark tones in the beginning of the film, it gave that ambiance of really just bleh. It wasn't really something that enjoyed. I never got really into the dark shades of showing like, oh, it's a really dark time, really struggling time. And I just didn't like that. And also, when I was watching this film, I agree with you. The news chopper like cuts were really good, but I just felt I've seen this type of shot work before done in that time frame in the 2000s, and I just felt really wasn't standoutish. It was like quick cuts were great. That's what gave me the 0.75, but it just it wasn't standing out to me. It wasn't something that I would go, man, the cinematography A plus. No, it gets a B. I'm giving it a B. I couldn't give it anything more than that because it's just cool. You're doing a rapid fire jump cuts. I like the shots that you're doing of the train. It's really cool. And I like the scene when Will falls and is trying to attach the train. It was really cool, but I just overall wasn't impressed.
Understandable. A lot went through my mind while watching this film, but it was enough that dropping it less than 0.75 wasn't really. To be honest, I'd probably give it a 0.70, but we're on the 0.25 scale, so can't.
Yeah. 0.75 is the closest you could give. And I agree with that. It's like between 0.5 and 0.75. It's not bad, but it's not amazing.
Agreed.
Directing.
I gave that a 1.
I gave it a 0.75.
Why?
His directing style, Ridley Scott, I love him to death. I love Deja Vu. I love what was it? Tony Scott. Ridley Scott? Oh, sorry. Tony Scott. Tony Scott. I love his work. I love what he does. Rest in peace. But to be honest, this felt like what his other films were. Grab Denzel Washington, make him a main dude, and make an action film that's cool and makes him have to struggle and has to be the guy who has the experience and understand what he needs to do. But then he's going through this adventure with a young protagonist alongside him, and he's going to have to be the leader. It felt like the direction of this whole directing was just one of his other films, like the taking of Pelham 123, Deja Vu, and Man of Fire. So I really like it, but it just felt repetitive to me.
See, and I just did the directing of this film. I didn't care about his past works, which I probably should have or put that into thought, but I did it solely for this film. I fully believe that what Tony Scott was trying to portray in this film was delivered. He wanted an action-packed film that told a true story and showed off how well the two real-life heroes did during this film. It had the story, it had the cinematics, it had the music, the acting, it was all there. And that's what he was trying to bring to the big screen, and it was delivered very well. That is my thought on it. I didn't really compare it to his other films. I understand that he had so many more where he just pulled Denzel in and put him as the main lead. But for this specific film, that's where I was at. He wanted to show this true story. He wanted to highlight these two individuals and show their heroism. And the way it was delivered really showed that Frank and Will struggled to try and get this train under control. It was delivered exactly how Tony Scott wanted to show the heroism between these two.
I see where you're coming from. Attraction.
That got a 0.75.
That got a 0.75. Yeah, that got a 0.75. Dark tones. That beginning was rough. That beginning. Oh. To say that this film, with its 90-minute time frame and 1/3 of it is slow, is an understatement. 33% of your film should not be slow. That the last 60 minutes, it's super like everywhere fast. It's great. But your first 33% of your film being like that was a lot. I lost appeal. I lost a lot of appeal to it. And I wish it was better. I wish it was only like 15 minutes. If they cut that in half, it might have been a 1.
I completely agree. I'm just going to basically say exactly what you did. At first, it's way too slow moving. As characters are getting introduced, they're trying to show that Frank isn't a big fan of Will at first, and then things start to progress throughout. But that first 30 minutes, man, that's what really hurts the film. And it makes it so that you just want to kind of take your attraction or take your attention off the screen. I'm going to be honest. I've seen this film a ton of times. I love it. But every time I watch it, I always skip over that first 30 minutes cuz I don't care about it. It's just it doesn't pull you into the story. I start watching from when Will and Frank enter 1206. Everything before that, I kick it cuz it shows no it just doesn't pull you into the story.
But that's a lot saying that if you're skipping that much, like that's a terrible beginning. If you're skipping that much.
I know. It's bad. I probably shouldn't skip it every time I watch it, but since I've seen it so many times, I don't feel like I need to continue watching that over and over because I know I don't like it. And I know my attention's just going to be taken off the screen. So I
Yeah.
just feel like there's no reason for me to watch it.
Dialogue.
Dialogue got a 1.
Dialogue got a 1. I really like the connection that Will and Frank gave. I like the fact when Frank and Will were talking about Frank's kids, he's like, yeah, they're paying for their way through school. How? They're waitresses at Hooters. And then he started laughing. He's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Stop thinking about it. Like, I just love that small little connection. I love Connie where she said, like, fuck you, and just went for it. And it's like, oh, so good. There's lots of little small lines that I liked. I liked when he's like, hey, I'm going to call you back, and just hung up and drove. It was like small little lines. It was good. I really did enjoy the connections between the characters with their lines.
I completely agree. I feel like when we reviewed 1917, just like at the beginning when they're talking back and forth about the cherry trees or in the cherry trees and they're talking about that stuff. It's kind of like that with Frank and Will in the caboose of 1206.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a back and forth talk that just feels completely natural, and I loved it. I loved the effect that how that basically set up their dynamic right from the start. There's a lot of funny lines throughout. One of the lines that Frank gives that I absolutely love is Will says, "I've had my goddamn training, all right?" And Frank says, "Okay, well, in training, they give you an F. Out here, you get killed." And that just, boom, sets up the story right there because 777 is on a rampage and it can kill someone. It's a high possibility someone's gonna die. I'm surprised that only one person died in this out of control scenario. And that quote applies to everything. A ton of jobs out there. People have all this training, but if it's not applied correctly out in the real world, people die. And it
Yeah.
happens everywhere. Even my job, I work security, and if I do one stupid thing, one thing that doesn't follow training, someone can get hurt. Anyone can get hurt.
Yeah.
And it happens everywhere you go. I love that line. It applies to almost everything. And then there's another one that Connie is talking to the people in dispatch, and she's like, "Get Galvin on the phone and tell him two guys are about to out on the main line are about to play chicken with our train." I just like that she said they're gonna play chicken with our train instead of could be a big crash disaster. She brings out chicken with our train. I don't know. I just really like that line. And another one she delivers is Galvin's like, "Didn't I tell you to get them off the main line?" And she's just like, "I asked them nicely." There were some pretty good bangers in there, some funny lines. I don't know. I thought that the dialogue really matched the situation that was going on in this film, and it was pretty engulfing. I got pretty engulfed into the story just through the dialogue alone.
No, I agree with you. Scenery.
0.75.
I gave it a 0.75. The dark tones they were giving throughout this whole film felt like it was a little too much. I understand the style they were going for the scenery, and it was very bland. Like it's Pennsylvania. What do you expect? It's all grassy hills. It's not a lot farmland, some city. It wasn't really standout-ish. It wasn't great. Like the colors they chose were just meh. They went for a muggy day. It was nothing great, nothing bad, but nothing to remember.
I agree. I don't know. I can't stress this enough. We've mentioned it many times. The dark tones kind of killed it, you know? It started out really just mucky and gross, and it's a weird way to introduce your characters right at the start to start with just dark tones. As the film progressed, the dark tones faded and the intensity kind of came up. It brought out vibrant colors. There were plenty of outdoor views, tracks, trains, uh, 777 barreling past these kids on a field trip. You know, helicopter shots were absolutely stunning. But that beginning with all those dark tones that didn't need to be there because it wasn't even a sad moment or there was not. It was just them introducing each other. It was getting introduced to the characters, and for some reason they went with the dark tones that usually goes with sadness or something tragic has happened, something really bad happened, but not with this. It was just introducing the characters, and I just didn't understand why it needed to be there. So that really hurt this film. Again, I feel like a broken record, but I just can't get over the dark tones that were given.
I agree with you. Recommend.
I did give that a 1.
I did give this a 1 as well. The movie overall it's a fun watch. It's a good sit down. If you have an hour and a half to burn, go right ahead. Watch it. It's a great one. I really did like the action. I like the Frank and Will connection. And I really did enjoy trains. To be honest, it was quite enjoyable to just watch a movie about trains and a true story. It's really cool.
I agree. I recommend this film to anyone. I really do. Based on a true events, and I eat that shit up. I love true event stories. Does a great job portraying the intensity of the situation, the stress and anxiety that everyone was feeling at the time. It's just that first 30 minutes of dark tones and really boring setup. I understand it needed to be there. I just think it could have been delivered in a better way. But beside that, the story intensifies. You get to really meet Frank and Will and the heroism that happened throughout this tragic event. It wasn't it really could have gone a lot worse than it did. And you won't really regret putting this on your watch list.
So overall, I dropped my score actually from an 8.75 to an 8.5.
I kept it at a 9.25.
As we are wrapping up, I'd like to talk about next week's episode. We are watching the 2019 mini HBO series called Chernobyl. Ben, that trailer, the poster art, dude, it looks intense. It's the untold stories of Chernobyl. And I don't know what to expect. I'm so excited, and I'm so terrified to see what was hidden from like society. This is the stories that no one's heard of. So I can't wait to see what's coming. I can't wait to see what's going to happen. So I'm giving this a series. I'm really hoping they did well. I'm giving this an 8. I'm putting a lot on this.
Man, I watched this trailer, and the fact that it's another based on true events story just excites me to my core. I love based on true stories. And this is an untold true story. And it needed to be made into a miniseries, not a movie, a miniseries. And every episode is just over an hour long. Every single one. So that tells you that this has a lot to say. I am stoked to watch this one. Super stoked. Trailer showed some intense things going on that I don't understand because I don't know the story. And so I'm so excited to learn what this is truly based on. And my expectations are starting off high because it's an untold story. It's a miniseries with each episode over an hour long. Couldn't be made into a movie. So based off the trailer alone, I scored it at an 8.5. I hope to God that this does not disappoint because I have very high expectations for this.
As do I. So as we wrap up, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning into this week's episode of Nerd Taku Podcast. If you want to find us, we're on Instagram at nerd_taku_podcast. We're also on Threads under nerd_taku_podcast. We are on all major podcasting platforms, and we are on YouTube under Kingdom Notes Studios. I'd like to say thank you guys for tuning in. My name is Eli.
I'm Ben.
Thank you all, and have a great week.
See you guys next time.